Guys, it's here, the brand new Castle Cobra 8. Today we're going to take a look at all the features on this brand new 6S 1/8 scale ESC, and then we're going to be putting it through its paces, and to do that, we're going to be using the beautiful new Kraton 6S EXB. But first, we got to get these stock electronics out of here. One of my main concerns with the new ESC is the 8 amp BEC limit. To test that, we're going to be putting a Reefs Raw 500 in there and one of these homemade fans. This Reefs Raw 500 can draw almost 5 amps at full stall, and this fan can draw close to an amp. That's going to be getting fairly close to that 8 amp limit, and I'm curious to see how the ESC handles it. To really push the ESC to its limit, not only are we going to be using a higher kV motor, but we're also going to be using a 16-tooth pinion. And to install this motor, we're going to be using this brand new M2C motor mount kit. Perfect fit, of course. This kit comes with a choice of 2 different hole spacings for the mount. We've got a stock size motor here, so we're going to use the smaller one. No matter what mount you're using, you always want to make sure that your screws are the correct length. If you use screws that are too long, you can actually damage your motor. Easy way to do that is just take a screw, screw it in by hand on your motor until you feel it very lightly stop, and then just make sure your mount is thicker than the amount of screw that's still sticking out. This looks just fine. I'm really curious to see if the ESC is going to be able to handle this 16-tooth pinion. If you're enjoying watching this video, make sure you get subscribed because we're doing these kinds of deep dive reviews all the time. Keep in mind what you're seeing here is a prototype part, so this design is subject to change. Before we install this thing, let's take a closer look at it. This is a 6S ESC. Castle, as usual, does not mention the power output. However, we're going to use the data logging to find out what the maximum power output is on that Kraton EXB. It's got standard 6.5mm bullets. It does have mounting holes. However, these are actually M2 holes, which, while they're going into aluminum, they are very, very small and quite a bit smaller than the holes on a Hobbywing ESC. Unfortunately, these holes don't seem to match any current hole pattern, which feels like a bit of a misstep to me, both on the sizing and on the pattern. I think they could have made these match a Hobbywing pattern and made them compatible with current mounts. That being said, this bottom case is all aluminum, and included we have a nice long sensor wire and the same switch that they've been using for many, many years. I'd love to see them update this switch as well, as whereas this is technically water resistant, it's not terribly waterproof, and these things do go bad pretty easily. Fortunately, the entire harness can be removed, and they're pretty cheap to replace. Comparing this to the MMX8S, it's about 3/8 of an inch shorter, almost the same width. The MMX8S will be a little bit taller with a fan, and the MMX8S is a little bit heavier. We'll talk a little bit more about this comparison later in the video. Included with this is a new Castle Link dongle, which we'll check out in a little bit when we get into the programming. Speaking of which, this does come with a quick programming guide and some stickers. Let's go ahead and get a connector soldered on these 10 AWG wires. I'm going to be using a QS8, but it's probably overkill for this application. I always like to add a little bit of solder to these wires, even though they're pre-tinned, because the pre-tinned solder is lead-free and it doesn't melt quite as easily. Always check your polarity after soldering something. As you can see, I just soldered this backwards. Let me fix that. That's better. Now let's get this installed in the truck. Because these screw holes are so small and they don't match anything that I currently have, we'll be using double-sided tape. And we'll be taping it to this really awesome M2C 7075 mount. Don't forget your prep, even on a new ESC. When you buy VHB, make sure you get it from a reputable source. There is fake stuff out there and it doesn't work as well. One step that a lot of people tend to skip when double-side taping things in RC cars is they don't give it enough time to reach maximum adhesion. Pressure adhesives like this flow into the little microscopic pits in the material, and that adhesion doesn't reach full strength for quite some time. I like to leave them overnight. While we're waiting for that double-side tape to come up to full strength, let's check out the programming. This is the new Castle Programmer V4. Unlike the previous version, it is USB-C, which is really nice to see. Other than that, it looks pretty much exactly the same. This is the brand new Castle Link V2 software. Let's take a look inside. Once we connect the Cobra 8 using the new Castle Link V4, we can see that it recognizes it, and it gives us an option to update the firmware. Let's see if there's an update available. All right, we've updated to the latest version of the firmware, and the ESC has restarted. Let's take a look at the settings. This interface looks a lot more modern than the previous version, which was functional but looked pretty dated. Here we can see we can change the settings for low voltage cutoff, as well as the BEC voltage. I'm gonna set that to 8 volts for the Reefs Raw 500. I'm really curious to see if this BEC is gonna be able to handle the Raw 500, that fan, and the other things like the receiver. power. Here we have the option to change different power settings, various brake settings. We can adjust what the auxiliary wire will do. If you're not familiar with the auxiliary wire, basically what it lets you do is connect it to another channel on your receiver. Then you can control various ESC functionality with your transmitter, such as setting a power limit. Here we can set current limiting for the motor, as well as motor direction and the sensing type for the censored system. This is where we can change various logging settings. It also allows you to tell the system what orientation the ESC is in. This is so the accelerometer can give you accurate acceleration data. We've got power wires to the left, so we'll set that now. Here you can set a throttle curve and a brake curve separately. This can soften up the initial feel of the throttle and brakes. Most smart transmitters allow you to do this as well, but it's nice to be able to do it in the ESC. And you can also set a reverse curve here. Now there are a lot more ESC features that I didn't cover or didn't cover fully in depth. I recommend you going through yourself, checking everything out, and looking up anything you're not familiar with. When you're done, make sure you click update so it sends those settings to your ESC. And now we're done. And then always make sure you calibrate your transmitter to your new ESC. Instructions on how to do that are in the manual. All right, guys, I'm gonna tidy up this wiring and I'll see you outside. Let's see just how powerful this Cobra is. All right, let's see how fast this thing is off-road. One more pass. Oh, she is quick. And that's only about half throttle, too. 57 miles an hour is pretty impressive off-road and quite a bit faster than this thing went stock. Let's take a look at the logs. All right, so you can see here that we had a maximum of 279 amps and a controller maximum of only 80 degrees Celsius. It also felt nice and cool externally. Zooming in on the speed runs, we can see we were only using a little over 100 amps during those runs, and I was able to get to a maximum of around 3/4 throttle. So those numbers are pretty interesting to see, and speed runs are fun, but I want to go bash. Guys, this ESC is absolutely awesome. It's got tons of power, runs really, really smooth, nice and cool. I even put a bigger motor in here to try and push it harder. Still stayed nice and cool. Had no real issues with it. Surprisingly, the BEC also worked just fine with this big servo and the big fan I had in here previously. Overall, fantastic ESC. There is one major problem though, and that is the MMX8S. This thing is only a little bit larger. With that, you're gonna get more power, almost certainly cooler running, the ability to run 8S, and most of the same features. And that's the real problem with the Castle Cobra 8. This thing is an amazing ESC. It's the king of 6S ESCs right now. But when you can buy an 8S ESC from the same company, or equivalent 6S and 8S ESCs from the competition for significantly less, I think it makes this a pretty hard value proposition. I'm not sure if they're going to keep this price where it is right now at $210, but I think they're going to have a hard time selling them at that price. Don't get me wrong, this is a cool ESC, and I really do think it is top of the range for the 6S ESCs, but it's just priced outside its market. What do you think about that opinion? Do you think I'm being too harsh on it? Let me know down in the comments. Once you're done with that, make sure you get subscribed, then check out one of these videos.